Beautiful.
Let's clap it up. Let's clap it up.
Hey, hey, hey.
That's right. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another great episode of Conversations Under the Hood. I'm your host, Robert Helm, and we have the wonderful
I'm the
super
co-host.
host. No, you're not the co-host. You're the super host. Dr. Libby Ray Helm is in the house, ladies and
Hello,
gentlemen.
hello. Welcome.
Yes, so we just want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. And we're looking forward to having a good show. So we hope that, you take some time to comment, share your thoughts, We definitely want to engage with you tonight. So, Doc,
Awesome.
I'm going to kick it off as I do what I normally do because, I have to do my sharing and things. So, if you don't mind, just sharing with us a little bit about your week. How's your week going?
All right, so I hope everybody had a great week and you stayed safe and healthy in all your ways. But my week was pretty good. We had a busy time at work. Of course, this is, the time where we have to be working hard and entertaining everything else that's coming down to the university in this current environment, So
Wow.
that was really interesting. A lot of meetings about that, trying to figure out how the decisions, that are done at the federal level are going to impact our university. So that's like an ongoing conversation. It is a very interesting conversation, right? And but most importantly, from there, I draw that it's very important to stay healthy, especially mentally, because all this can be very stressful.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's really important to recognize the importance of worrying only about the variables that you can control.
Yeah. Right.
Anything that is within the circumference of your ability to control those variables versus everything else on the larger scale that you cannot control. So that's always, a challenge. But just staying, alert and being aware of that and giving yourself a lot of understanding, time and to process that is very important. So yeah, outside that, it was an interesting week in a way that, we're discussing all of this kind of stuff while being aware of your own level of stress, in that space. So, yeah.
So, how about last week's show? Let's recap a little bit on that, if you would. And I know that last week we were trying to make up for a tornado and all that craziness.
Yes.
But I think the show overall, after I had a chance to look at it and things, it was just like, a good, relaxed,
good
way to kind of slip back into things, right? So, anything stand out?
No, what I appreciated all that is like the advice to learn to be self-reliant, especially, in the event that you don't have all these luxuries, and I'm saying they seem like the necessities, but when you think about it, they can be luxuries. Like in our case, we didn't have any electricity, right? Therefore, we didn't have any heat and we didn't have any water.
Right.
What I'm saying? Because we have a well. So what was interesting is like we have to figure out still how to feed our family, how to stay warm, and how to still find a way not to stress. So we got a lot of advice too from our viewers, and we shared about how we were able to cook food outside on an open fire.
Right.
How we're able to even think about the whole ability to just cook, not only cook outside, but we have just bought $500 worth of food.
I know.
And a lot of this food would have gone to waste because we just did not have, we couldn't, freeze, all that food so it can stay fresh. So, and then we had to think, like, well, what do we do? Instead of losing all this food, and then, or else have to claim insurance and all of that complication, it was like, okay, why don't we just cook the food that are likely to go to waste? So we figured out that we could, make chicken nuggets, we could make fish sticks on an open fire, and you were even coming up with all these ideas of putting a foil over and under and how to keep rotating it. That was actually exciting, in a way. So that That was really good, and a lot of people had a lot of good information, to share, regarding that.
Right.
So yeah, that's what stood out. What about you? Well, how was your week?
Man, well, my week,
so
it was awesome actually. I had a couple things that, well, this construction management class that I'm participating in Detroit. I had this was the second week of that, and it really is, wow, I'm so glad, that I was accepted, and that, it's more than what I hoped for, actually.
Yeah.
In terms of, just having a really broad idea of the industry of construction from a commercial level, industrial level, is really broad, and kind of my vision for quality vision construction. So that's, I thought, is pretty good. And then, as normal, I have so many irons in the fire.
Yeah.
I also wind up starting my class in solar energy, and so that is becoming more than a notion, because every time I get involved in it, I get so excited about it, and then I immediately lose that excitement in a way, just because I'm not working in that field, right? And so I'm very practical about things, and so like I like to be able to, if I'm gonna read something, I want to be able to kind of do it.
Oh, you're hands-on there.
Yeah. Well, a combination. Right, because I can appreciate a good presentation or demonstration, and that'll help me gain some understanding. But then, having the opportunity to do it myself,
it helps you retain information.
Right.
Yeah,
which goes into my other great thing. I'm excited about this new opportunity that I'm being presented with, to be a professor. And so,
right.
So so that's pretty
congratulations.
exciting. Yeah, thank you.
Clap button.
Yeah, we got to hold on. So it's pretty exciting in that way, and so I'm just happy to be able to be back in the space of teaching, It's been, a little time since I've been in a classroom environment, and so being back in this setting is going to be a really exciting opportunity, because, the industry continues to change.
Yeah.
And so this way I can stay on top of it. So I'm excited about that. So I know that was a long explanation, but
no, that sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Congratulations. I know you love to teach.
I do.
Especially because you were SME on the subject matter expert.
Well,
in this sphere. And a lifelong learner, because you continue to learn, you continue to take classes.
Yes.
So I got a question for you.
Okay.
And my question to you is, like, you being a COO, if you will, of quality
CEO, yeah, that's you.
Well, I ain't gonna not answer to my names, but so you've been a COO for a long time, and you've been on the both side of the business, all side of the business, from labor to the finances to leadership and all of that. So what are you learning, or what was the aha moment in regard to these classes that you're taking in Detroit? Yeah.
Wow. Well, I think so far I've actually had a few aha moments, right? The first day, and boy, I shouldn't say this out loud. Please, y'all don't laugh at me, but the first day I was late for class, right?
Yeah.
And part of it was because I kept going through this aha thing, or maybe like instead of aha at that moment, because it gave me anxiety going to participate, because I didn't know what I was going into. And being in the big city of Detroit, downtown Detroit, and all these high rises and things, that was intimidating, and not knowing where to go, and things not being real clear, at least initially. It slowed me down even further. So by the time I got to the class, I missed half of the class. And what was crazy is, I had to get security to get me into the up to where I needed to go, because it's a secure floor. Then from there, I get to the floor that is secure, and the door opens, and I'm thinking there's going to be somebody. Wasn't a person. There wasn't a single person
Oh no.
It was like, as I stepped off the elevator, I looked this direction, and it was a big, giant, huge, beautiful wooden door. And I said, wow, man, that's beautiful. And then I looked the other direction, and I see this big, beautiful glass door.
Yeah.
And through it, I can see outside. You know, I'm on the 40th floor.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, wow. And then I realized at that moment, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Because there was no instructions of like
Yeah.
if I'm supposed to, like, is there a call button or anything, like there was nothing.
No sign either
Nothing.
that says
So,
class and then room 314 or whatever. Nothing
right.
like that.
I start banging on the doors like I'm in high school.
Right.
I was like boom, 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 boom. And
Yeah.
then I was like, okay, well, nobody came, so I didn't know what to do. I didn't see nobody.
Yeah.
And then the next thing I know, a gentleman opens the door and he's leaving. Like, he wasn't coming to open the door for me. He was headed out. And I was like, excuse me. I'm here for, you know, this construction management school, and, you know, and the guy smiled and he was like, Dickerson, right? I said, yeah. So he walked me in. Now, I had no idea who this guy was. I thought he was another student.
Mm-hmm.
So last week, which is week 2,
mm-hmm.
I found out that he actually was the attorney, the head attorney for the construction company. And so, you know, he did a presentation the following week. Mm-hmm. And I didn't recognize him, right, because it happened so fast.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, afterwards he was like, were you the guy who came last week? And blah, blah. I said, because I asked him for his card, and he was like, yeah, I was the guy who let you in. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I was kind of embarrassed. It's a good
thing you were nice and polite.
Exactly.
Right.
I was a little embarrassed, but at the same time, it wound up being, I think, a good moment, because we created an experience that, you know what I mean? So now, in the future, as I need legal services for construction, I would at least reach out to him.
At least you have a connection.
Exactly.
You know, so that's the importance of, you know, being aware in terms of like how you respond and treat others, right? Because imagine if, you know, under that level of stress, imagine if you were just like, you were rude,
right?
Or you approached him in a way that turned him off. That can have a long-lasting impact.
Absolutely.
Right? And, you know, so being aware of how you communicate or how you present yourself, you know, is extremely vital.
Absolutely.
Because it can make or break relationship, and most importantly, it can rob you the opportunity to connect with people that actually can help you grow.
Right.
And open doors of opportunities for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's very true.
I couldn't agree more.
So, even with that, I will even add, because I always say, you know, kindness is free. Being kind is the most easiest thing, and is the most, and it is very free. But, and I don't remember who I was sharing this with. I think we were in some sort of a meeting, and we were talking about, basically from the leadership perspective, being aware of how you lead, you know, your strong qualities versus your weak qualities, and, you know, how you can be forever evolving, you know, and how to also understand situational leadership.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Having the ability not only to be cognizant of that, but the ability to understand. You know what I'm saying? And to be able to transform, you know, depending on the situation. So anyway, it's part of my contribution was that I remember meeting a lot of people in the leadership. I don't always remember maybe unhelpful behavior. I don't remember all of it, but I remember every kind gesture, you know, from all the leaders that I've ever reported to. You know, anything that was kind, that it seems like was beyond and above just their expectation at the job as a leader, it's something that resonated. And every now and then I have a tendency to reach out to them and said, that act right there was so significant that I still remember, and I just want to let you know that sometimes, as with this privilege and opportunity to lead others, I often draw from that experience. You know. So yeah, absolutely. This is just to summarize what we're talking about, really, or what I'm sharing here, is that, one, being aware of how you interact or come across, you know, to others, and then two, being kind, even if when you have nothing to gain whatsoever. You know, you'll be surprised, you know, years later, you know, it comes back to you. And certainly, you see how every time when we run into the kids that I used to teach, the grown-ups now, but all these kids, when I was working on my undergrad, I taught at the school, and it's amazing how they remember how you treated them to this day. Every time they see Mama Linda, they get excited, and then I have to remember, like, yeah, honey, who are you again? You don't remember me? I still get all kind of hugs and and stories, and so yeah.
All right. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge some of our guests. We have Tracy Nicole. Thank you very much.
Tracy.
Hey, we got your sister in the house, Miss Talia Daniels. Hey. What's going on, sis?
Nice.
Thank you for joining us. Yeah, so we're just trying to expand this conversation as much as possible. So please feel free to comment. You share your thoughts or what have you, because we do want to have a fruitful conversation.
Absolutely.
So on that note of, the way that you interact with people or carrying yourself kind of in a positive nature, I think we had a conversation, if I'm not mistaken, it was you and I, about negative energy. Do you remember that? Recently we had a conversation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that kind of leads me into that conversation, just thinking about, various things that I have, like my personality, for instance, right? Can sometimes create a feeling of negativity maybe for other people. And I know that, right? Like, sometimes I don't know, it's hard to say. It's like, if you imagine when you get mad, you react, right? Like, when I was younger, I would either play basketball, I would take it out on something. In other words, take it out with something, I should say, not on something, but with something. And at that time, it would be like basketball or some kind of activity.
Right, that's how you process your emotions.
Well, that's how I cleanse. So I don't know about processing, because I don't put a whole lot of. It's not a thinking process for me as much as it is a eliminating and moving on process.
Okay. Okay.
And so, having that type of approach to things, sometimes I feel like it can make people think that I'm rigid, or that I might not be empathetic or sympathetic in a certain kind of way, right? When in reality, you're probably right, I'm not empathetic or sympathetic in a certain kind of way, but I do have empathy and sympathy. You see what I mean? It's just that the way that my makeup is, right, or the way that I deal with my feelings or emotions, I feel like somehow it, I don't know, ultimately it goes back to this energy thing that I'm trying to get to. It's like, when I feel mad, I feel like it's projected out of me rather than me physically taking it out on something or doing like I used to, physically, actively taking it out that way, that it projects out of me even when I'm not saying anything. Sometimes it's just the look.
The presence is just heavy, and the energy
or the lack
heavy.
of expression or the lack of interaction. Like, and I know that. Like, I can feel it, and I do think about it, like, consciously. But it's one of those things that, I don't know. I'm aware of it, right? And so I don't really know sometimes how to control that, I guess. You know what I mean? So anyway, so I was just bringing up that whole energy thing, thinking about, the attorney piece, because that made me think a little further. It's like, had I act differently, like he opened the door for me and I didn't say thank you. And he walked me to my place and I didn't shake his hand or something like that. And I was just like, I'm supposed to be here. Because, unfortunately, some of the people who participate in the class, they do kind of have that very standoffish, not nice the first step forward kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's like you got to make them nice almost instead of them
like
just
you
naturally.
So,
so that's, anyway, I can ramble all night about that, but.
But that makes sense, right? Because there's a lot to unpack there. But I think one of the things that's really good that you're doing is like you are self-aware. And I think it starts right there, right? When you're aware that sometimes when I'm under stress, I can come across a certain way and it can make people feel negative, right? It can make people view me differently than what I'm trying to present, because I have not gotten a chance to go and cleanse these emotions, playing a word, right? And that's why sometimes in this kind of conversation, we spend a lot of time talking about emotional intelligence, being aware of the emotions that you're feeling at the time, and most importantly, having the ability to understand and manage, those emotions.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that takes a lot of practice. Some people can do that naturally. I think I can do it naturally because it used to be like a coping mechanism for me, or a protective gear, if you will. So it's kind of like if you're a kid in school and you're being bullied. If you can make your bully laugh, the bully will leave you alone.
Right.
Sometimes if you're kind to the bully will leave you alone.
Right.
And that was me. I used kindness, but as a result, it's like it's not something I have to work hard, to. And sometimes I can be a little bit contradictive, because sometimes I do have my weaknesses. Like, most of the time if we're talking about certain subjects, right? And it's something that maybe I invested a lot of time studying, reading, and trying to understand. And when we engage in the conversation, and the people who have never even really thought about it or invest any kind of time to educate themselves, want to dominate the conversation. That can be very frustrating. And it's like I have to watch how I respond to that. Instead of responding in a way like, hey, until you crack a book, crank a book, very open, at least do a little bit of research. This conversation is not going to be fruitful. There's a better way to share with somebody and guide somebody, to encourage them to look into things before they speak with such confidence and conviction.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it's something that I have to be aware of. I was speaking to a friend of mine recently, and she said, hey, you realize that in this conversation, I'm doing most of the listening, and I don't feel like you're giving me the same, regard, the same compassion. And I had to think about that. At first I was just like, the first thing that my mind went to is like, well, I can think of many areas where you were able to, where you were actually interrupting. And yes, I listened to you, but I realized like, no, wait a minute, I'm going in a defense mode.
Right.
Instead of listening and actually learning something here, and realize that conversation goes both ways. I can't be dominating the conversation.
Right.
I cannot just be talking without listening. And when somebody takes the time to make you aware of that, it's an opportunity.
Right.
And only good friends will be able to do that, instead of just getting annoyed and close down communication and all of that. So. But, so all of that is just being aware, being open, and, allowing yourself to learn from every situation.
Right.
Because going into defense mode, it's easy and it's lazy. You know what I'm saying? Because that's the easiest thing to do. If somebody say, hey, you're doing this thing, and you go back to like, I wouldn't do it if it wasn't this. Oh, no, I'm not. It's easy, instead of like literally listening. Like, wait a minute. Is there, there's a possibility that I'm doing that. So what can I learn from this situation so I don't do it again? So next time I can have a better interaction with this person. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, all of that, plays a very important role. Yeah.
It does. And that's, I have to say, personally for me, I think that's a commendable attribute. You know what I mean? Because, my life, and I'm speaking again for me, and I know this maybe doesn't apply to everybody, but I think for people to be, mindful and sensitive to other people's, feelings like that is good, but I don't know if, like just the impact of my life or what have you causes me to move, like I said, when it comes to emotions, like I don't, because when you say process, I think of like somebody who's actually dealing with them, and I probably deal with them in some kind of way, like, because I do think at times, like when I'm angry especially, I be talking all kind of shit to myself, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I do. I talk all, man, I be talking all, but after I'd rather talk it to myself than to somebody else, right? But two, I think what it does is it helps me get rid of my impulse response first, and then it buys me time to have some realization. You know what I mean? Because whereas if I just respond back immediately with how I would respond, my impulse.
It's like an
response.
impulse. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm probably gonna yell. I'm probably, or raise my voice. Like outside of what because I know I raised.
Yeah.
But beyond, like, cause I think about points where I found myself, not with us, thankfully,
right,
but forcing myself to be mad. Like, look, my face even changes. Just saying, I just
I know.
it.
I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Don't be bad.
No, but forcing myself to be.
To stay in that state.
Not even to stay in the state, but just to be, like, to take mad beyond mad unnecessarily.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Almost like, you might say, like, the straw that broke the camel's back kind of reaction. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you done built up, and now, But, so, but being aware, it's like, the more I think about it, the more I realize how conscious I am within my emotions and my moments, like that realizing that consciousness, I'm like, okay, so if I realize it in the moment, because it's one thing to realize it after the fact.
Yes.
But if you can realize it in the moment, then you got an opportunity to
manage,
something.
Manage it and make sure that, because that's the thing, right? An impulse, if you're not aware of your emotions at the time, or let alone the ability to manage those emotions, you end up acting in a way that sometimes can alienate people for life, or can leave people with the wrong impression of who you are, even though it was just momentarily. But lucky for you, because the kids and I have been kind of like working with you throughout and holding you accountable and refuse to just accept it. So I think that's why you're aware of it, and sometimes you find a way to manage that without having to allow that to continue to impact, people around you. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, it's really interesting. Like today we're talking about how passionate you can be, about the topics that we're talking about. And I think the message for today is like, don't let that passion take away from the important things that you're trying to share. Because delivery is just as important as the message itself. So a lot of people use this analogy, right, of somebody serving you your favorite steak on a garbage can. No matter how great that steak looks, and no matter how hungry you are, you're most likely not to eat it because it's served to you in a garbage can. So it's those kind of things. But yeah, absolutely.
No, I mean, I get it, Like I said, I'm at a point in my life where it's not about being right or being wrong necessarily. It's about making it through. You know what I mean? And when I say making it through, I mean at a place of peace. You know what I mean? Because I'm not trying to do anything but navigate life in a way that I can wind up where I feel like I need to be, or I want to be, or that kind of thing. And so thankfully you and my loving children have been patient enough with me to help me realize those things, because it's important, right? When you build in relationships, and sometimes we forget about the fact when we have our family that we still building relationships. You know what I mean?
We're creating memories, and the question is, what kind of memories would you like to create? Because we have to remember, especially as adults.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Because you said memories, and I'm saying relationships. So I don't want you to forget what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because when I'm talking about relationships, it's like, I'm talking about mechanics. I'm not talking about just the feelings side of it, because it's like our relationship. Yes, we're a pillar for one another in some way or another, right?
Where you're strong, I'm weak. Where I'm weak, you're strong, right?
So I feel like that is more or less what I'm talking about. It's like that relationship. That's the mechanics that I'm talking about versus the emotional side. Because this is the thing. As much as I can make you upset with me, you still going to allow me to lean on you as that pillar.
Right.
Or you'll still be
love
that
somebody.
Right, and vice versa. Yeah. So that's the relationship that I'm saying sometimes that it gets abandoned or it gets forgotten because you said, "Oh, she's my wife," and you just supposed to be like this, and I'm sorry, you're supposed to do that. See, I get
you get more passionate, but yeah, absolutely.
So that's where I was going with it. So go back to the memories.
Yeah, no, I think it's very important what you were saying as well, right? Recognizing that somebody is not just there for you to talk to or treat however way because that's how we condition that your spouse should just take it. Right? Recognizing when somebody allowing you to process, even if it's in a way that is unacceptable, but while continue to bringing it to your attention.
Right.
To like, hey, I understand you're upset, but it's not okay for you to express your frustration in this way.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so if somebody who will invest in you like that, that's the relationship you're talking about, like where you continue to learn from each other. But where I'm talking about, it's like, imagine if you were somebody who was not receptive to that kind of, response or feedback, and you just want to show your frustration because you had a bad day at work or whatever it is, it's frustrating because a lot of people, unfortunately, are conditioned that way.
Right.
Which, cause sometimes it can lead to a lot of dysfunction in a relationships and, end up with a lot of, relationship failure. But I'm just saying that part of investing in this relationship you're talking about is the ability to hold each other accountable.
Right.
To make sure you bring awareness, when somebody's like, I think today, part of our relationship, I was like, hey, when you get passionate, you get to raise your voice, and you're like, but I'm just passionate. And I say, yeah, but I'm not accepting it. I don't want to accept that, right? It's like, let's not be, I don't want to be compliant. I still want to tell you that you have to lower your voice because I can hear you, and I can even hear you better.
Right.
But I watched you lower your voice because you became aware of your information. So where we have to separate the conversation from how we feel about each other.
Right.
So together we've been together for 25 years. So it's easy for us to do that.
It's been that long.
It's been that long.
Yeah.
But about creating memories, right? Is that we have to remember and keep in mind that how we treat others, especially kids that have no voice,
right?
They are remembering all those things, and if we never have an opportunity to go back and correct how we may have impacted them negatively, that's the memory that they keep.
Right.
And then as an adult, sometimes it's hard to connect genuinely,
right?
Because all they remember is all those whoopings, all those berating and yelling and all of that, right? And I'm not saying that we shall never discipline our kids. It's just that we have to remember that all of that experience that we are creating, it literally is creating a memory.
Right.
I can tell you sometimes it was some of my friends or even my colleagues, when they talk about their relationship with their parents, it's interesting because all of the negative things that have ever been said to them, all this negative experience is shaping how they relate to their parents as adults. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, yeah, I gotta go see my toxic mother. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And you're like, whoa, And so for me, as I listen to people, some of my kids are still very young, so I become very conscious in terms of like what kind of memory I want these kids to have, what kind of memory of me and I want these kids to have, what kind of relationship I want to have with them in the future. That is not so difficult because of the things that we have not worked out.
Right.
Right. And so the role I play today in terms of so that's what I mean when I say creating memories, because I feel like as an adult, you do have a choice to want to create good memories or bad memories that will be very difficult to correct in the future.
And you got to be conscious. Like, that's what I was saying earlier for me.
Yeah.
Like, I am trying to be as conscious in the moment, right, as possible. Like, try to be hyper aware or hyper awareness or whatever term that is. But and just like you're saying with kids, I think that's the most important part of it. Is like, we have the tendency to do on to our children what was done to us.
Yeah.
Or what we
passing
think.
on the pain, the stress, and the trauma.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so doing that, you know, again, I think you lose sight of the need to build a certain kind of relationship, because especially when you consider that as parents you raise up your child, and then your child, as you get older or elder, your child takes care of you or raises you down, let's just say, right? And so you know, that relationship that we're talking about is tied to that type of experience as well. But now, you know, you still have people who have been through
worse.
And still show up and still do. So I'm not suggesting that people won't or can't, but I'm just saying that, you know, to build and take time and to be conscious about it, because it's like just as conscious as you are about disciplining, or just as conscious as you are about loving somebody or wanting to be loved, you know, it's important to apply that consciousness to areas that you might be weak in as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
And to be receptive to feedback.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we're not aware, you know, in terms of like, you know, our weaknesses. And not only we're not aware, you know, we tend to repeat most of the time what was done to us, you know, and we just, like I said, you know, just passing on the pain, the trauma, and all of that. We're repeating how we were treated as children instead of taking the time to think, now that as I'm a grown up, I didn't like it. It didn't feel good when I was treated that way. And therefore, I shouldn't do it to these children who don't deserve it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But, you know, bottom line, again, it's like when you do self-assessment and you become aware, and then you allow yourself to be receptive to any kind of feedback, especially when your weaknesses are being pointed out to you.
Right.
It can be very difficult. You know, like I was just giving an example how a friend of mine was like, hey, I'm doing a lot of listening here. Can you give me the same courtesy?
Right.
The first, easiest, and laziest thing to do was to go in the defense. But I caught myself at that moment. I'm like, okay. And then I became, you know, little by little, started being conscious when I'm interrupting.
Right.
And then I started giving disclaimers. So, like, I want to make sure that I'm not dismissing, you know, what you're saying. And she was like, but when you start with but, you're negating everything that I just said. And I was like, okay.
Right.
Then I started saying, instead of but, I said, in addition to the point you just made. You know what I'm saying? And then the conversation started getting better and better. And I realized that sometimes when we are not receptive to that kind of feedback, because it's difficult, because it's pointing something wrong about us, and go in a defense mode, we won't be able to connect genuinely, not only with each other or our children, but also with our friends.
Right.
And it's so true, because I do have some friends where I'm too much of an introvert, you know, to begin with, but no excuses. There are some friends too that I'm like, oh my God, this friend, I have to like take them in small doses. Because why? Whenever we interact, you feel like you're being talked at, you know, instead of actually engaging equally in a conversation. And that can be exhausting. So when my friend said that to me, I was like, wow, the way I feel about, you know, engagement with other relationships, you know, when I participate in other conversation, I don't like being talked at.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I don't like being made to prove I know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm saying? Especially if it's somebody who clearly have not done the work necessary to engage productively in this conversation. I'm almost ducking, because it's like, I don't want to, it's not like an insulting statement, but it's just true. It makes conversation really difficult, you know.
Right.
So, but with adults, at least we give each other that courtesy, right? Where we can say this, and then you're like, oh, okay, I see. But then with kids, we never extend that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Don't talk back. Be quiet. You know, look at me when I'm talking to you. Like, oh my God, the freedoms that we give ourselves to treat people that cannot defend themselves.
Yeah.
You know
that's interesting, because I think that is the first statement that that I can think of that started to change my life. You know, and I can remember almost when, not necessarily, I know where we lived at the time, where our first home. And you told me that because I think I wanted to punish one of the kids for
Oh
something.
yeah, you're pulling the belt.
And,
Yeah.
and you said that, to me, and I said, wow, that's true, because once I realized how easy it is to dominate somebody, a child, right? When you are threatening them with, punishment or things like that, that it's one of those, it's one of those whoa moments, or like one, you know what I mean? One of those moments. What did you call it earlier? Or aha moment.
Yeah.
That was an aha moment. I see we got
Yeah.
Let's
your thoughts,
well, that's okay. Hey, their thoughts are more important than mine. Let's see, who do we have here? Virginia Caldwell. How you doing, sister? Welcome to the show.
Yeah.
And it's not showing up over here, so let's look over there. It says, you are such an amazing person, mother and friend. It's an honor to thank you. I've been trying hard. I breastfeed all of my children.
It does.
No, that's very kind. And you're right, she is. You are, a wonderful woman, and I'm thankful, like I said earlier, for you and the kids. Like, you guys have, and I know I'm not no walk in the park. You know what I mean? And I don't claim to be, because I know where I come from. And I'm a realist of that. So, and I think I know where I'm going.
Yeah.
That's
you gotta give yourself credit, though. I hate to interrupt. I'm sorry, honey.
Yeah.
But it's like, just like you said, a long time ago, when your form of discipline, the first thing you wanted to do is pull a belt, and I said to you, hey, there's a better way to get your point across and teach a child not to repeat, the offense, if you will, rather than physically having to punish them.
Right.
Because I said you wouldn't do that to somebody who will defend themselves, even if they may have done the same thing to annoy you. So you gotta, really examine that.
That was the point that's the point I meant to mention, but I didn't. But that's the light bulb that came on when I was talking about the dominating the child. It's like, I thought about that, man. I was like, dang, because I think what you mentioned to me was like your friend would spill something on your carpet or something. I think that was the example you used. Wow, I actually can remember stuff. That's pretty good. But no, when you said that to me, it made me realize that, dang, you're right. Because if that kid was an 18-year-old, or a 25-year-old, am I gonna go and yank him by the arm and say, sit down, or, demand them to do something, or eat your, wipe your, am I going to do that, or am I going to figure out a way, how would I talk? And that's what I started, which I'm not sure how good this is, but that's when I started talking to our oldest like an adult. And I know people used to be like, the goo goo gaga. I'm like, I don't do goo goo gaga. Why? She's not growing up to learn how to goo goo gaga. She's growing up to learn how to talk and rationalize and all that. Which maybe was kind of to a fault, right? Because in times where I should have treated him like a kid and loved on him like a kid, I gave him tough love and treated him like a young adult. You know what I mean? So,
no, that's really interesting, because to me, when I go back, I think I draw from my own experiences. Maybe that's, having a burden of empathy, a burden with empathy. I usually go back and say, how did it make me feel? Did tough love work for me, or did it further harm me? You know what I'm saying? And then, so before I don't always get it right. I don't claim to get it right. I appreciate the compliment, sis. I think exactly the same way. And when I see you with that gentle parenting and how you engage with the kids and all of that, so it's amazing. You can always learn from that. But I go back to say, this did not feel good. This left me emotionally paralyzed. And I didn't learn from it. Instead, it just made me a fearful person. It made me angry, and it made me, in so many other ways, it kind of stifled my growth. It impacted my self-esteem,
Can I say something? Because I'm the exact opposite. That's what I find so, like, when I'm listening to what y'all saying, and I'm trying to, like, find ways to digest it and make it make sense to me. It's like, just that statement in itself just reminds me of how different we are in our approach and our upbringing. Because, like, where you actually, it sounds just in your presentation there, how much you think about the situation and how it impacts you and how it impacts other people, right? And in my case, the things that I grew up with and the environment that I was kind of in, I just push past those things as fast as possible to get to the next thing, which means in which I don't put a whole lot of thought. That's what I was telling you earlier. Like, I don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about my emotions. I focus on getting off past them so that they're not holding me back. You see what I'm saying? So the energy and the stress and pain and suffering, if you will, that you might have from those feelings and emotions, right? From something happening to you or somebody doing something. Sure, I'm going to be angry. Sure, you know, I'm going to respond that way. But then I'm immediately looking for a safe place to just be who I am and who I want to be without the burden of that. And so that's why I don't hold grudges. And I can just move on. You know what I mean? Or I could literally disregard somebody and not look back. Which sometimes I have to check myself because that ain't who I want to be. I don't want to be able to just forget people and be like, you know. So it's interesting, man, that how we can still love one another and still build a dynamic family, right? And be so different in that approach. But that's, like I said, that's where the learning curve for me, you know, and I'm firm, right, in certain ways because it has given me the strength to be able to battle the things that I had to face. So,
you know, it's so interesting because in all the behaviors and how we exhibit or express ourselves, whether we're happy, angry, or frustrated, I believe it's conditioning. And part of conditioning is what we allow each other to get away with.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, it's so interesting. I was talking to a friend of mine at work, and they were sharing how they didn't understand why, you know, their spouse was upset with them. You know, and it started at dinner, and I think, you know, her chest was showing. She had a low cut, you know, shirt, and it was just a little bit revealing, and it made him uncomfortable because they were around other people. And so he really was just trying to make her aware because other people were looking. It made him uncomfortable. So it was like, honey, can you pull your shirt up? You know, it's showing. And then she was very upset. So he was showing me about this, and I was like, hey, let me tell you something. You just called her out in front of everybody else. You put her in a very compromised position. I can see why she was upset. I would have responded the same way too. You know, but the thing is, like, because a lot of women, not everybody, and I'm one of those, instead we go internally, we get quiet because we're not going to call you out and match you in your energy like that in front of people. It's not helpful. Sometimes we wait until we get home and say, hey, what was up with that? And sometimes, and he was explaining, like, you know, yeah, she was so mad at me, she's saying this, and I didn't understand, I was just trying to help. And I'm like, no, you didn't help. You know, now think about it this way. Let's say it was you. Right. You know, let's reverse the role because this is teaching empathy. Let's say you were having a wardrobe malfunction, or maybe you have something in your face, and instead I said, what will she have done? You know, he said, well, sometimes you just reach over and wipe my face. I said, see, that's somebody who loves you and not want to call you out. Because she could have said, honey, you got something on your face. Oh my God, it's disgusting. Wipe it off. How would you feel? It's like, well, that would have not been very nice. I said, well, how do you think? Why are you confused about why she will be upset about that behavior? Right. Imagine if you would just went, give her a hug, and pull her shirt up a little bit, or maybe whisper, hey, honey, your shirt is a little bit low. You know what I'm saying? And then she probably will have gone to the bathroom, adjust herself, done to just make it everybody's business and make her uncomfortable. Right. You know, regardless of how justified you feel. You know, at that point, it's not about you. It's the position you put her in. And that's not fair. And honestly, it's cruel. You know, and he was just like, wow, now I feel like I really have to apologize. I said, well, here's another disturbing thing. You know, why do you feel like now you have to apologize because another woman made you realize what you were doing? Why didn't you just believe her emotions and validate them first? She was bringing it to your attention like, I'm hurt. Why did you have to gaslight her? Whether you meant to or not, it doesn't matter. You needed to validate how you made her feel. You know, so it's really interesting because I find myself, and I think because I'm kind, so people, by choice, people find it easier to talk to me, you know, from different spaces of life. So not only I lead in the space that I'm in, I also feel like I'm coaching in a way. But to be fair, my friends also give me the same grace. They don't hesitate to call my weakness, and they see me trying to learn from it. You know.
Wow. I mean, I can't add nothing to that. That's good. I mean, I think just being a male and being on the other side and listening to that situation with your colleague and his significant other or what have you. I could have easily made that same mistake. Maybe in the same, because I can think of how easy, and if he's uncomfortable and not really thinking clearly and all that other what he's worried about, which I'm not making an excuse for him, but I'm just like, if I'm being real, I got to look at both sides, and I could see for the woman how it would be embarrassing to be, oh, what are you talking, and everybody look your direction. I get that, you know what I mean? Or maybe he tried to pass hints and she didn't get it. You know what I mean? Maybe his hints were, you know what I mean? So, I don't know. But definitely, that's something to definitely think about, because I could have easily made, if not the same mistake, something close to that. You know what I mean? I could, but then listening to, from a woman's perspective, what would have been, that's like shit. I didn't even think about that. Sitting here listening to you, I'm like, damn, that's a good idea. So I can imagine being under the pressure of maybe being worried that she's gonna be, exposed and not wanting her to be. You know what I'm saying?
She'll lean over and everything will just spill. So I get that, right? I get the first, emotions, like trying to bring that to her attention in a way that maybe was not acceptable. So it upset her. But another thing that was concerning to me is like when she brings it to your attention, you act like you're not validating how she was feeling. Right. Because I said, I can tell you as a woman at that point, it wasn't even so much the fact that you humiliated her. It was way more than that. It was just like, how could somebody that I trust and love do this to me? Let alone the act itself. So it's kind of like a form of betrayal, if you will.
Man,
and
boy,
then
I'm like, man, that's painful. Hold on.
And then
ladies and gentlemen,
and then when she brings it to your attention, instead of validating her feelings, which say, honey, I love you and I care about how that made you feel, you further push her away. It takes another woman, and I will argue that if I was just anybody, then, you probably would have not listened. But given the respect, possibly that you have for me, particularly because of my position, you're willing to listen. And now you're internalizing it. So my homework is like, think about, why did he have to come from me for you to actually consider the person you love?
I can answer that. Or give you a answer, not the answer, but a answer, because
but it was something to work on and being aware, of.
But again, just to put both sides out there, right? Because everything you're saying sounds like the right solution and stuff, right? For sure. Well, I'm just saying. But just responding to what you're saying, how could you not? Like, or why do you need to? So I'm just responding to that. And I'm just saying, maybe he values your opinion, right, differently than he values his wife's, right? And that's very possible, because as much as we love our spouses, it's not impossible for you to see somebody as a person that you admire intellectually, right? So in that regard, that's one thing. The other thing might be that maybe the dynamics in a relationship, because you assume that she thinks like you and she feels like you and she acts like you, right? Whereas she may be the exact opposite. Maybe he didn't have to tell her that too many times in the past. Why ain't she conscious, and why don't she know that her self is showing? You see what I'm saying? And I know,
like a justification.
Well, you can call it what you want, because you were in that position. You're the woman. But if you were the man, I could see, and I'm not saying that's right. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying, when you don't know all of the dynamics, it's like, I can think of another mutual fund that we know, and how this gentleman does the things that he does, and how his wife responds to the things that he does. You see what I mean? So I can think of a multitude of people who do things different than we do. Right? And I can't say that we do things right or not. You know what I'm saying? Like, because our dynamics are different. So that's all. I'm just responding to that.
There's a lot to it. There's a lot to consider
from an advisatory perspective. That's where I was going with it. It's like, because you talking to him as if you know that there's no pre-existing reason why he might be doing that. You see what I'm saying? At least that's how I'm hearing it.
No, I can see that. But in addition, thank you, sis. In addition to what the statement you made, no, I was, and it makes sense now, because when you say "but," it's almost you're negating everything that you just said, and that's not what I'm trying to do. And I do want to acknowledge and receive what you said. So, in absence of the information, you have to go with the variables as presented to you. Right? So responding to the information that was shared, like, hey, at the restaurant, when the shirt was down and everybody was looking, here's what I did.
Right.
And I don't understand why my spouse is mad, because I was just trying to make her aware.
Right.
Then I'll just say, okay, well, here's how somebody may be upset because of that.
That's why I said you're right. I'm just giving you the other side.
I don't have to be right, by the way. I could be absolutely wrong. I'm learning to be receptive, of criticism, as well. But at that moment, I sincerely was listening and trying to engage and share another perspective that, my friend was not thinking about, right? And at that point, I was like, oh, I can see that. And I was like, when I said, let's turn the table, what if this? And then I was like, yeah, that would suck.
Good point. Now, my question would be this.
Yeah.
And we wind and way down.
Yeah,
my question would be this, why do you think he didn't think about that? See what I mean? When he's coming to you to get validation of his feelings. See what I'm saying? If the relationship is...
Yeah. To answer that very quickly, sometimes I've learned to do this, right? When somebody brings me some information, or to be aware of, or they just want my advice and everything like that, I try very much not to turn into an attorney, right, and start questioning. First I feel like I have to listen, and I have sometimes to kind of like gauge the emotions that they bring that in,
right?
And quickly I could gauge that my friend was frustrated by the fact that his spouse was upset, with him. That was what was in front of me, and I was like, let's see if we can unpack that to help you maybe understand why anyone would have been upset by this action,
right? And
then from there, let's see why a couple days later, because the restaurant may have been on Thursday, now it's Monday, you're still talking about it. And I'm sure you want to resolve that. That's why you asking for advice, right? And I was like, not only you did that act, you have to listen and validate her feelings. She needs to know that the way she's feeling is valid and it's real. And once you do that, you can...
Say that one more time.
And you have to do that when you love people.
Say that one more time. Hold on.
I don't know.
I'll say it. Hold on. I'll say it for you. Validate her feelings. I think because we have not put any nuggets out, so I'm not gonna say that's your nugget, because I'm gonna let you give another nugget, because I like that nugget. But I think that's a great nugget. I really do, because it does start. I mean, because as from a man's perspective, from me, not all men, but just from another man's perspective,
right?
Sometimes the emotions can be, not even the emotions, the forethought. And the lack of emotions, maybe, or you know what I mean? Because I think like people not having, maybe somebody who ain't never been embarrassed before, for instance, might not even realize that could be embarrassing. It's problem solving to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway, I think the points you make are very valid. And so, what is the nugget, Lindy, that you want to leave for the people today?
Well, the nugget is, especially what I've learned recently on a conversation with a friend, right? When somebody bring a concern to your attention, and trying to explain to you how you made them feel or how you make them feel, I realized that it's not fair or the right thing for me to explain myself, or to try to negate what they're bringing to my attention by using, and the word is gaslighting. I'm trying very hard not to use it because I think it's overused.
Petrol lighting.
Yeah, petrol lighting. Right? But the point is like that's not the time to justify my action or to explain my action away or to be dismissive.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes taking a moment to just care about how you impact the other person and validate their feelings.
Right.
And then try to make an effort to want to internalize, their feedback and therefore, make an effort to change
mm-hmm.
or to learn from it because so you can connect genuinely. I think that's a nugget that I want to leave today because as much as I think that I do that, it
mm-hmm.
took another friend to be bold and brought that to my attention and it really resonated with me.
Right.
So I think in any relationship, if we learn not to be defensive, deflect, justify, or shame the person or gaslight that person and just take a minute like, wow, to acknowledge, their pain, or whatever their emotion, validate it, support them, sometimes that's just enough. Right there.
Y'all heard that. Sometimes validation is enough. We think flowers and candy sometimes don't do the trick, gentlemen. So we just have to take time and listen and ask questions and be sensitive to, and sometimes that could be difficult. Empathetic,
mm-hmm.
yeah, because mm-hmm. all of those pieces are important. And frankly, ladies know that men have room to grow, right? Some of us act like sandpaper. But sandpaper eventually does get smooth. True. The more you use it. So yeah. I think today has been one interesting conversation. And so your nugget was valuable. I hope my nugget adds a little bit of sauce to it.
No, you have a lot to
No. Actually,
in a very unique perspective. Go ahead.
Well, my nugget is simple. It really is. And it's just to be conscious and be in the moment because everything that you're saying, even the conversation we're having right now, be conscious because if the friend was conscious about everything that was happening and in the moment, there might have been some point that would have given him idea that, hey man, you gotta do this in a way that is not, alerting the whole world.
Right. Right.
Or exposing your wife, if you will, to the room or whatever. But so yeah, I think just being conscious, being in the moment. I know for me, it's helping me day by day because I know I got lots of space, lots of room to grow, and so I'm just like I said, I'm on a mission. We talked about this a couple shows ago about planning the next 50 years of our life, and for me, it's serious, man. It's really serious for me because I don't want to leave this earth not doing the things that I want to do, not having an impact in the ways that I want to have an impact. And so these first 50 years have taught me that there's things that in order for me to get there, I have to make some adjustments. You know what I'm saying? And so so that's what being in the moment and being conscious about that, I think is going to help me help myself do that. So.
Yeah, let's grow together. Let's dance with life together each and every day, being present, and not stress about the idea of what we think life should be, what we should have at this age, and and not keeping up with the Jones, whatever that looks like.
Right.
Because that can be very tricky. Sometimes we can look at ourselves at this moment in our life, the age that we're in, and all our experiences, and judge ourselves harshly. And to me, I'm just like the next 50 years is just, to your point, being in a moment, dance together with life. Let age adorn us, and there's just stress less.
Yeah.
And not judge ourselves very harshly.
I like that. Stress less. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to end the show on that note. We want to thank you for joining us tonight. We appreciate the comments. I know this looks like our internet has been moving a little slow here, so the comments have been coming slow.
Yeah.
So we apologize if we've missed anybody. So we just want to say thank you to everybody. I wish I could thank you individually.
Thank you so much.
But we appreciate your support, and we look forward to next week. So until then, Conversations Under the Hood, we out. Peace.
Bye. you.